Good. All right, we'll call this meeting to order. The Finance Committee, September 12th, 2023. Item B, roll call. Let the record reflect Alder Galvin, Alder Johnson, Alder Hutchison are present. Alder Burnett is excused. Item C, approval of the agenda.
I would, if it pleases the committee, I would like to amend the agenda to move item E4 ahead of item E1.
Let's entertain a motion to approve first, and then. Yep.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Galvin, Hutchinson by second, and then Alder Hutchinson has an amendment.
I would like to amend the agenda so item E4 goes ahead of E1.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Motion by Hutchinson, E4 to E1, second by Galvin. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We now have an amended agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item E, regular business number 1.
Oh, we gotta do that.
Oh, did I miss that? Yep.
Motion approved.
Motion to approve the
Second.
August 15, 2023 minutes by Galvin, second by Hutchinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item E, E4, consideration with possible action on approval of the contract for the Sergeant Commercial Exam through Emergency Services Consulting International for up to $27,500. Staff, unless there's any questions?
I have none.
I am not.
Did you want to say anything? You don't have to. All right. We just need a motion.
Motion approved.
Second.
We have a motion by Galvin, a second by Hutchinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 1. Consideration with possible action on the resolution to refund personal property taxes for account number 30328, HS Group HR Inc., for a total of $212.97. Any questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Galvin, a second by Hutchinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 2, consideration with possible action on the City of Green Bay 2024 fee schedule resolution. I was happy to see that the biggest item that I was concerned about was an error, which was the fees per square foot for HVAC and electrical. The only other one, in Director Renierweg, Interim Director Renierweg, just a question about Board of Appeals fee. This one just doesn't feel good to me. I appreciate why, why you're saying that, the staff time that goes into it, but particularly in circumstances where individuals are granted the appeal, it's because of situations where the code just almost is kind of like in conflict with that lot or that circumstance. I mean, could you just speak to, like, how often do we grant these? How often do we deny them? Is there perhaps a mechanism where we could say, if your appeal is granted, maybe your fee is refunded? I'm not saying we have to do that. I'm just trying to understand if it's even possible. Is there a precedence for that?
I would really have to check on that because the Board of Appeals is kind of a separate entity and there are certain rules and regs with regards to what we can and can't do with the Board of Appeals.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fees, clearly we could adjust those fees if we need to do that, but as far as waiving them dependent on the outcome of that vote, I'm not sure if we can do better.
Sure.
Lindsay.
Yeah. Okay. Like I said, I'm not even sure that I want to go down that path. I'm just trying to understand more about, again, recognizing I get the effort goes in there, but oftentimes it's because our code, right, is creating a conflict for a property owner. If they're granted that reprieve, it's just kind of doesn't feel good to me that we're doubling that fee. Okay, not enough for me to suggest any changes here at the committee level, but I just didn't know if you had any other opinions. Your opinion is to do it, that's why you're putting it forward. But.
Right, so the 1 and 2 family is the 125 and then others are the 250. Are you thinking both of those fee amounts are?
Well, then they both, I only saw because right now it's 125, right, to submit the application, now it goes to 250.
1 and 2 family residential is 125.
Right.
All others are 250, so are you thinking the 125 is too high for the 1 and 2?
No, the 250,
Okay.
yeah. And that's where, gosh, if you're doing $30,000 garage, maybe it's not that much, right? But if it's someone who wants to put in a small set of steps or a patio, right, that seems, as a percentage of the project, a little heftier.
Right, but it's the same staff work that has to go into it with regards to the
Right.
work to get to that board of appeals level.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question just on erosion control permits.
I'm sorry, which permit?
Erosion control at 16-40. It's all in red. Are these new, or is it just been revised? It varies from $50 to $100, and then I guess there's a fee in lieu of providing stormwater management per equivalent runoff unit, and that's $4,200. Does that mean the city does the erosion control then, or what does that mean?
Stormwater management is completely different than construction site erosion control.
Okay.
Construction site erosion control is during an active construction site.
Okay,
Stormwater management is the management of sediment leaving the site over a long-term period. Even a grass surface has stormwater emanating from it, which carries pollutant load. So, a stormwater management fee in lieu. If the city has constructed a regional stormwater management pond or regional stormwater management facility, and you have a development that discharges to it, rather than building your own, you're buying your way into our facility.
gotcha. Okay, thank you. Now, the other ones, the erosion control permit,
Largely, those are being shifted into Chapter 16, coming to the Department of Public Works versus where they were in inspection, to
okay,
reflect the work being done by DPW staff on construction site erosion control, not inspection staff.
okay,
So the fee on the other department went away,
okay,
right, but was kind of created here.
okay, good, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Entertain a motion.
Motion approved.
Second?
We have a motion by Galvin, a second by Hutchinson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay. Item 3, consideration with possible action on the 2024-2028 capital improvement plan. Last year, we kind of split this up over 2 meetings. Is that kind of your intent today, too?
I asked who couldn't attend tonight, and they all were able to attend. So
Okay.
I did end up splitting it.
So maybe
I also
we'll-
think that this is, third or fourth year that we're looking at it. It's kind of the big picture. A lot of the same items that have probably still there that were there previous years, and they've just now moved up a year. So they're all here.
Okay.
So, and again, I think I will just speak that Alder Johnson had put a request in, and it has been the goal of the city to try to bring the five-year capital improvement plan together with the budget, and then by the time we're done with the budget, we also have a chance, really know what we're looking to bond for 2024. At the same time, we bring the operating budget through, so this is bringing them together kind of in a parallel.
Do we have a recommendation from bond council on our ceiling?
For the borrowing.
Correct.
I
Because what I'm seeing in here, and please tell me if I'm wrong, I only saw the shipyard in here as TIF-supported borrowing. Everything else was levy-supported. And I can't imagine that we're going to be able to support all these requests.
What you're only seeing is the expense side. You're not seeing all the funding sources like grants, wheel tax, other funding sources, sanitary store and
Right.
parking. So that document was not included in here. So we're really looking at here
Okay.
are the capital expenses. These are the needs. I do not have the funding side in it because that's a much bigger task to try to put all the funding
Sure.
to offset these expenses.
Okay, and
That
so-
is not prepared yet for
Yep.
tonight.
Yep, and obviously will probably impact some decisions down the road when it comes time for the bond request. And I made a note of that, ARPA, wheel tax, TIF, because I'm sure there's other TIF potential projects in here.
Correct.
Okay. All right, you guys have a preference on how you want to go about this? Do you have questions you want to shoot off? Do you want each department head to talk about their requests? I mean, I reviewed, but I kind of want to defer to you on what you want.
We could do it department by department.
Okay.
If we go down the page, that'd be good.
Just maybe high-level overview, not necessarily looking for each
Right.
department head to explain every single
Right.
thing.
Right.
But maybe what are your highest priorities, highest impact areas?
Starting on page 55, there is about a 6-page summary by department. It rolls up all their major items, their equipment, and their fleet. And right now it's by departments, so if you wanted, we could kind of run through it by department, starting on page 55.
Pages here are not,
You're not seeing the same pages?
I'm not sure they're not, I don't see a numbering.
Oh, I'm looking at the PDF document itself. There's 602 pages. Are you seeing the same thing?
600.
No, Bill's probably inside the,
Oh, okay, yours are lining up.
Yeah.
The packet itself is, for the finance packet, was 602 pages. The majority of that is the CIP. For every item, there is a backup page near the, in that packet. There is some detail to say what, the useful life, the age, what year, what the funding source is. But this, what you're seeing on page 55 through 63 is a summary by expense, just the expense side for the items. These are just to show you overall the needs of the city. We don't want any, major surprises of, that all of a sudden we have it's just really to show you all our needs for the next 5 years.
and did you set a minimum threshold? Is it 5,000 and above?
Correct, there should be nothing on here under 5,000, that is what we have set it as a threshold, and then if it's anything is under a year, that should be on here. Anything that's questionable that is more of a software, we try, in most cases, is not on here also.
Okay, and so to be determined at a later date, funding source for how we pull all this together. This is just to really make us aware of the capital purchases,
Correct.
whether it's funding, bonding, notes, ARPA, et cetera.
Grants, yep,
Okay.
correct.
Good.
And this is similar to how we did it last year, we went by both departments. By two different meetings, we had all the departments talk to their needs. And then really at the last meeting, then I sort of brought it together and showed these are all the needs, these are the funding sources that we have available at that point, saying which would drive roughly the bond or if anything could be moved to the operating budget at that point.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so if we were to go department by department.
IT.
Yeah, Director Ellenbecker, you're first.
I'm actually going to, we got clerks, treasurers, I also have the clerk in the room. And this is a new item, this was not on there. There was a number out there, and I don't know if you want to talk to the clerk about the replacements of our DS200s. And looking at a phased approach.
Yeah.
So our DS200s last about a decade. Most of them are from 2013. There's a handful that are from 15, 18, and 19. In conversation with the county clerk, what the county likes to do is to have the municipalities replace them pretty much all at once. In conversation about this relatively large purchase, I have offered for the city to purchase them in waves. We do need 2 this year, though. For 2024, we must replace 2, so that's about $15,000 with the actual cost of machines, which is $7,000, plus shipping and some programming. But if you look at a phased approach with 12 every year for the next, from 2025 to 2029, then we get about $84,000 a year.
Are these connected to the internet?
They are never connected to the internet in the city of Green Bay, but in Wrightstown they are.
Ooh. Plot thickens.
Taking the heat off.
I apologize, but if anybody is interested in just the printout of those 6 pages, if they want to make notes, I do have a paper copy.
Oh.
If anyone's interested.
What is this job if you can't have a sense of humor?
Right.
All right. Okay, thank you, Clerk
You
Jeffries.
don't have anything?
Okay, IT?
Yeah, on the ArcServe backup and core switch router with carryovers from previous years, the core switch router may be able to be pushed into the data center upgrades, the $500,000. That's all ARPA funded. We're working on getting all the quotes soon. DR site air conditioner, that's been a carryover. Whether we replace it this year or not, we'll wait to see. 2 new items on there, FortiNAC and FortiSIM, are cybersecurity products that we'd like to implement. They're just continuation of our increased cybersecurity and awareness footprint. We're looking at, working right now with the PD on a grant to fund these. So they may be grant funded, we're still working that through. And the remaining item is MDTs. All the police car MDTs need replacement. Then the quantity is wrong. There's actually 55 MDTs. They want to order 60 to have 5 spares for hot swaps. And that is actually right around 270, so it's a little over. So.
Okay. Thank you. Unicourt?
I don't believe the judge is here, but that is something that came up in the budget meeting, that they have some very outdated, and in some cases, equipment that does not work in their courtroom. So this has not been on the list, but they were looking for, they were asking whether that or not they could put it in the operating budget. We did for sure say, let's get it on the capital improvements or potentially bonding if we are not able to get it into the operating budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Dave, I don't know if you had any more to add.
No,
It's just
the equipment
something-
is very old. I've been here 16 years and it was in place before I got here. I don't know if half of it works,
Okay.
so.
Chief Davis?
Yes. So for police, obviously, a lot of what you see on here is just replacements for patrol vehicles. We're still getting about 3 years out of a patrol car, so that's why you'll see the same one pop up a couple of times over a 5-year period, sometimes here. Some big ticket items for us, our AEDs, defibrillators, are at end of life, and we're working with fire to make sure we're using the same thing they are, so we're consistent across the city. We put those in all of our squad cars for obvious first aid reasons. The building backup power generator is an issue that's nearing the end of its life. The $750,000 in year 2 for a command vehicle is our half of a shared resource that we're working with the fire department on. And that's a mobile command post that instead of each department having its own, because those things have gotten so expensive, we're collaborating on this, and so it'll cost probably about half of what it would cost to outfit each department with one. You'll see a lot of just things on here related to our facilities, like the HVAC unit that needs to be replaced. Again, the backup generator, security camera replacements, those kind of things. We are going to need a new humane truck, obviously, backing up to handheld radios. Just the cost for one handheld radio is about $4,500, and we issue those to every employee. And then we're also in the process of trying to implement radio encryption, which you'll see down the list a little bit, and that's at $925,000. We currently do all of our patrol dispatch in the clear, so anyone with a scanner can pick up that radio traffic. That has in the past resulted in people who chase scanner traffic to show up at calls. And then an even bigger problem is there's a lot of personally identifiable confidential information that goes over that radio, like people's names, addresses, dates of birth, calls involving people that include sometimes medical information or sensitive information associated to names and addresses that really should not be broadcast in a way that anyone with a scanner can pick up. But we recognize that that's a pretty big lift for radio encryption. That is always just a really expensive project, but that's fairly important to us.
Chief, is there another way to solve that problem? Right, and obviously our needs are always growing. There never seems to be enough money. And so it's just, identifying ways to be resourceful and picking on that one because you're talking about it, but also because that is it's almost $1 million. And it's something we don't have right now, and we obviously function. We'd like to improve. And that's where the fiscal health and public, safety balance comes into play.
And there really isn't. You know, another issue that we see is it's not uncommon now with scanner apps on your phone to see the person in the stolen car that you recovered who was listening to you in the process of trying to recover that stolen car. So, you know, in this day, a scanner used to be something that you had in your living room and you plugged into a wall. And now it's something that, it's an app that anybody can put on their phone. And we have some of the more sophisticated people involved in criminal activity who are able to use that to monitor what we're doing and try to interrupt them. And there really isn't, you know, at least that I know of, there is not another way around that. And we're not the only ones grappling with this issue because of how expensive it is. But, you know, on the other hand, maintaining the sensitivity of the information that goes over that radio system.
One of the more successful burglary rings when I was working was a group that were using scanners to listen to police calls. They figured out by listening what cars were in what sectors based on their call sign. And so they were successful for quite a while committing burglaries and avoiding the police.
I heard Hutch was pretty smart back
He
in
was,
the day.
guy goes over a fence like nobody else. So, I mean, I can see what he's asking for here, although it is a big ask. When you think about security, I mean, any number of things, search warrants, SWAT calls, all this kind of stuff. You've got individuals showing up on these scenes or trying to get involved in these scenes that you're going to be putting more people at risk, including the officers.
We do have some encrypted radio channels for, you know, like the SWAT team will use on a deployment, but everything that patrol did in the run-up to that SWAT deployment is just broadcast in the clear. This is to encrypt all of our radio nets. For, you know, for a smaller, like a planned operation, like a surveillance operation or something like that, we have some ability to do that, but we don't have the ability to encrypt all of our radio dispatch channel. And a big part of the expense for this is radios in patrol vehicles because we, to save money, recycle those. So the radio in your patrol vehicle has probably been in a few before that. And so we have to upgrade all of our radio equipment to encryption capable. For the last couple of years, as we have replaced radios, we have purchased some that are encryption capable, which has actually made this cheaper than it would be if we had to replace every one of our portable and vehicle-mounted radios.
So is that a one-time expense? Is this recurring? What does that look like?
It's a one-time expense to switch on the encryption, and that's what you're seeing here. There is an increase in cost over time to replace radios because the encryption-capable ones are a little more expensive.
So it's a service tied to the actual hardware?
No, it's a capability of the radio itself. And and all of the new portable radios that we bought in the last few years have the capability to be encrypted. And so you don't have to worry about that again until it's time to do a life cycle replacement on that radio. And then you have to replace it with another encryption capable one, which costs a little more than one that isn't.
What's the average lifespan of a radio right now?
You would want to say we're at 10 years
Okay.
of a radio.
And this 925 is to turn that on for all radios?
This is to just upgrade all of the ones that need to be, that we would need to replace with encryption-capable radios to switch on again.
Oh, so it's actually buying the hardware that can do that?
Correct.
Got it.
And then there's some other costs just associated with getting dispatch tied into that kind of thing.
Okay.
Chief, rifles,
Yes.
$122,000 each year for 3 years.
Right.
How many rifles are we talking about?
So we need to replace basically all of the patrol rifles in our possession. And in the past, because the ones that we have, and there's a problem with the way we deploy them that I'll get to in a second. The ones that we deploy on patrol right now are at 10 years, and that's end of life for one of those. We have, and without getting into too much detail, but we also have a certain number of rifles that are in caches for, say, large public events. Should you be at one of those, because we don't individually issue rifles to
Right.
officers, and so you need a lockbox up from someplace at an event in case, God forbid, there's an active threat issue. The problem with some of those is some of them are so old that they're old. I mean, I'm told that some of these are even Vietnam era equipment. And the patrol rifles that we use right now have a much more state-of-the-art red dot sighting mechanism. It's called a holographic sight, and that's what we train our officers with. A lot of these cache rifles don't have that. They have iron sights, which our officers do not regularly train with, which is a problem if you need that in an emergency. The solution that we've come up with across the board to fix this issue is to just issue a rifle to everyone in patrol. And then they're responsible for it. It is it has the red dot optic that we train people on with a backup iron sight in case that doesn't work anymore. One problem with just having, right now for patrol, if you're a patrol officer, your patrol rifle goes with your car. So every car is assigned one of these rifles. And my firearms instructors assure me that somehow they are able to zero these red dot optics in a way that is the same for every member of the department. I have never heard of that before, but I also trust my instructors, and so if they tell me that's how that works, then that's fine. But in the time between when somebody checks the zero on that sight, at the times when somebody checks a zero on that sight, you have no idea. Did you go over a bump in that car and knock that thing out of alignment? Does it even work? I mean, hopefully officers are checking to make sure the equipment works when they log on for the day, but that is not a good way to issue that kind of piece of equipment. It's not like the old shotguns like we used when we were in patrol, right, that has a bead sight on it that's the same for everybody. You can leave that thing in the car and it's basically indestructible. These are equipment that really should be individually issued. So the plan is, again, do away with cache rifles altogether. Issue everyone one who needs one, and then if we need to have a lockbox at a big event or something like that for officers working it, they bring theirs, it goes in the lockbox, we deploy it at the event, and we handle it that way.
Where would they keep them when they're not in their squad car?
So, glad you asked. We're working on as cheap of a plan as we can come up with to secure a couple of rooms in the police department building for an armory. There's some racks that you can get, as long as you can secure the doors, then you can put racks on the walls. And we should be able, we think, they're still working on the details of that, hopefully to get that out of existing resources. It's going to be a matter of putting cipher locks on a couple of doors.
So some of these rifles then that you're talking about are from the 1033 program. Is the government still handing out those kind of items?
I don't think
That's
they
pretty much
are.
done? Okay.
And, the problem with 1033 equipment all along was that it was military equipment, so you have to adapt it for civilian
Right.
policing use. I've never been a big fan of that. I mean, I know it's a controversial issue, but in any event, we've got equipment that if we needed it, it's about the worst emergency we encounter, and I can't guarantee that it's going to work.
So this 122 is going to cover the rifle, the sights, magazines, slings.
Yes.
So what are you looking at, like 200 or 300 rifles?
Probably more like 180-ish. This is to phase it in over 3 years.
Okay. We're not talking suppressors or anything else
No.
like that? Just your typical M4 type?
It's not even an M4. These aren't fully automatic. Because
So,
fully
I'm
automatic
sorry, yes.
weapons don't.
But the short barrel collapsing stock type?
Probably not the short barrel. We've run into an issue with those that, number one, you have to make sure you're using the right ammunition for those, which we're investigating that right now. But also, at the end of their lives, we can get more money out of a longer barreled rifle, and there's really no operational reason to go with the shorter ones. You have to have the special tax stamp from the government to buy one of those short barreled ones, whereas we can, we sell it to a reputable wholesaler who will give us more money if they can in turn sell it to a wider group of people.
Okay. So you're planning on doing this over about a 3-year period?
Yes.
That's all I have. Okay, thank you.
Anything else for police? All right. Chief Knott, Fire Department.
All right, good evening. What we're looking for with our requests are just ongoing capital replacements. Looking at, we continue to struggle with price increases on our end, much like the police do, and then long lead times. So some of our shorter lead times are actually for our ambulances at 18 to 24 months once we actually place an order. So that's kind of, is going to be an ongoing struggle that we'll see as an exponential price increases. We've seen prices of over 50% on certain vehicles in the last few years, and that's a continued struggle that we're trying to decipher with finance the best we can with that. We're also looking at some different equipment and capital replacements for our stations with, again, with our 9 facilities. So struggle to keep them all updated and maintained as we go, but looking to try to be proactive with that and actually push a more proactive capital replacement of those stations as we go too. Our buildings are all kind of tired and really need some investments in them as we move forward with this. But really what our proposals are looking for is sort of simple things. Our dishwashers, our water heaters to upgrade to commercials, maintaining our garage doors and floorings, and then one of the newer components of this is on our second page of that was looking at outdoor warning sirens. There's a series of sirens throughout the community that provide that early warning for outside use in the event of a severe weather or other type of incidents. We've realized that those have been not maintained well over the last few years. We're actually replacing 2 sirens this year, and then we're working to put that on a capital replacement program as we move forward. And we're updating sirens that are from the 50s or unknown ages, and so it's well overdue. We have an agreement with those with the county to maintain them, but the actual cost of implementation and installations is ours. They'll replace and maintain as they need to smaller items, but then we're at a point where 2 are actually not functioning, and then we're worried about other ones that will be in that similar situation. So we're looking at a replacement program with those. As we go down, just some additional equipment too, with our thermal imaging cameras. Again, our thermal imaging cameras take a lot of abuse. Those are used by our firefighters to identify hotspots and do search and rescue in fire situations. Those have an end of life and they've approached that, so we're looking to replace those. And then, again, just capital maintenance issues, but certainly open to any questions with that.
2 questions, Chief, both kind of surrounding the same item. And, we allocated $1 million for land acquisition.
Yes.
For a new fire site, and then, of course, just the capital expense related to the construction of the fire station.
Right.
I realize you may not have all the details ironed out, but certainly I think there's an expectation that that's going to be done in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
So probably should be in this plan somewhere.
Okay.
And to the best of your ability, right? Because I think when we started this 5-year plan, the idea was for us to be able to say, okay, hypothetically, we can't do all that in this year. Can we shift it to this year, this year, this year? And that's kind of, we're trying to get a better arm, I think, around this whole financial process, so
Right.
we can better forecast when funding might be available to take on certain projects.
Got it. And we're very creative and working, I'm pretty proud of our partnership that we have with community development to really look at, a future fire station, what that looks like. So we're trying to be really creative, really innovative in what that design looks like. So we'll certainly put some numbers, but again, the numbers are shocking as far as what we've seen in price increases over the years too. So, and we see supply chain issues, we see cost increases, but we will do the best we can to figure out.
Yeah, they're placeholders, and we recognize these numbers are gonna change from year to year.
Okay.
You know, I'd also encourage you and Director Ellenbecker, I mean, we have that ad hoc facilities committee that was supposed to look at all of our facilities, and we have a number of things on here that committee is supposed to be kind of, you know, reviewing and updating on, and one of those was the fire station. So, you know, I don't know what the status is of bringing that committee back together, but it seems to me it should be sooner rather than later, so that we can address some of these capital plans throughout throughout all the departments. So, okay. And any other questions here?
Yeah, Chief, I continue to be really shocked at the cost of some of these vehicles you guys drive.
As I am,
Starting to make the military look like,
yes,
Good deal.
yeah.
yeah.
But I really got grabbed by this urban search and rescue vehicle. Do we currently have one?
Yes, we do. We currently do, and what we're looking at that is this would be similar to what we purchased for our hazardous materials response vehicle. We think that price is a little bit higher than what it will actually be. But like I said, we're trying to be realistic with these numbers. We've seen, you know, again, I'm as shocked by these numbers, if not more than everyone else in this room is too. So, you know, that would provide for a vehicle itself plus some additional equipment. But like I said, the cost of that is probably, you know, approaching double of what we've seen in the last 5 years. It's the cost of fire apparatus, and again, for that vehicle, we're probably talking about a 4-year delivery date from the time we order.
Have we ever deployed an urban search and rescue vehicle?
Yes, yeah, and I actually.
I mean, actually deployed and used it, not just it shows up at the scene.
Yeah, and we hope with this vehicle, provide additional capabilities, we use it more often too, is what our goal is. And again, we're part of some statewide response teams and have other contingencies that are required. And then plus we have no other resources to call if we should have a trench collapse, or building collapse, something like that.
Okay.
That's what this vehicle will bring to the site.
And then $104,000 for windows at Station 1?
Correct, which again, hopefully goes away.
Station 1 goes away.
Yeah, so that would be something that, again, our plan is that building, and that includes also, but again, we're at a point where windows are potentially falling out, much like we've seen at Station 3.
Okay.
So, you know, it's either we build or we have to do something, because like I said, Station 3, we had a window actually fall out, and they had to put it back in and re-secure it. So it's, we're at a point, like I said, with some of our buildings that we have to do something. And again, 1 and 3 are scheduled for replacement, and those items would be dropped off of this list.
And that's 25 too, right? So hopefully we get this ad hoc committee together that can actually start making some recommendations to your point, to get rid of that.
Very good.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate the information.
Okay, Director Grenier, DPW.
Well, I don't know how down in the weeds you want to get with all of this, but I think what you're seeing over the next several pages is a combination of equipment needs for replacement, street and bridge replacement and maintenance items, and some limited fleet replacement. I say limited because much like what Alder Galvin was talking about with the fire department, our fleet needs are getting more and more expensive. If you look down our automated refuse trucks for 2 trucks, it's about $730,000 for 2 garbage trucks right now. And those things, after 8 years, they are tired. As we start working through, again, we've got some street reconstructions that are listed out individually, some facility needs now, as we start getting into the east shop and the facility needs there. We are pushing those needs out as far as we possibly can. Then we start getting into enclosed trailer that we're looking at equipment and fleet needs for this coming year. And so again, just the way that things come out, you know, somewhat alphabetically here, it kind of becomes a mishmash. But luckily, like the front end loader, we've been able to hold off and phase in those replacements. The fleet manager, when we first started with development of a 5-year program. The fleet manager actually went through and we've got a document that lists all of our assets, what the replacement schedule is on those assets, how many of the assets are at or beyond useful life. And most of our equipment is actually at or beyond useful life right now. I would encourage any of you to let me know if you're interested. The mayor last winter asked if he could do a ride-along during a plow event. And came back after 4 hours riding with one of our Sweet 16 truck drivers, and his first question to me was, did you intentionally pick the worst piece of garbage that you have? And I said, no, you just got stuck in a random truck. Why do you ask? And he said, I spent the better part of the time riding around holding the dashboard in place. Otherwise, it was falling into his lap. That's the state of the equipment that my folks drive every day.
I'll take you up on that, Steve, if I can drive it.
If you've got a CDL, we're all in. We'll even train you on the CDL. So again, going through some of our equipment needs here, again, getting back into the Henry and Hinkle streets, that's reconstruction, more bridge work, then we get into some equipment or replacement for a vehicle lift, a resurfacing program. With all of the road projects, the goal is to hold between about 31 to 34,000 linear feet of road per year. Now, we'll have years like we had last year, where 4 or 5 projects got shoved back because of funding needs. And as a result, we're going to be down around 27,000 in 2023. At some point, either we're going to fall behind or we're going to have to make that up, so we may wind up having larger years where we're going to do a 37,000 or 38,000 linear foot street. We continue to coordinate those needs with the sanitary and storm utility, and most appreciably with the water utility, because the water utility does not bond for these types of projects. They pay as they go, and they only have a certain amount of money that they can generate to do that. So we may find ourselves at a point in the not too distant future where we're going to be asking the Common Council, if the intent is to go forward, how comfortable are you paving a brand new street over a 50-year-old water main? And that's the choices we're going to have to come down on. So again, continuing on, what we simply have here is a mix of equipment needs in the short term, fleet needs over the next 4 years. Capital projects, road reconstructs and resurfacing, and then some, near the bottom here, we get over into the west shop. Our west shop is the older of the 2 facilities and obviously has the larger needs. One of the things you'll see, there's a request in there for $2.8 billion this year for HVAC. That building, I believe, dates back to the 20s and is boiler served. So HVAC is an issue over there. Holding that boiler together has been a trick over the last decade or so.
Is the building still in good shape?
At times.
I mean, is it worth sticking $3 million into?
Yes, at this point.
Okay.
We would be looking, a replacement building is going to be on par with a replacement fire station or, we're going to be north of $17 million on a municipal garage that's that size.
Okay, a couple questions I have for you, Steve. One is, I know we've got a meeting coming up to talk about Adams Street and some Washington Street stuff. And while I understand it, that would most likely be TIF supported, should probably still, I mean, I would imagine that should still be in here too, whether it's next year. I know there's a desire by some folks to have that done next year. Whether that happens or not, well, that'll come through in our conversation, but just thinking at least it should probably be in here, right?
If you desire, we can go ahead and put something in there. Until it's a project, we haven't included it. When it's a concept, we don't put concepts in our plan.
Okay. Let me circle back on that,
Sure.
maybe towards the end of the discussion on the whole CIP.
Okay.
And I appreciate that distinction, and I get what you're saying. The other thing that I wanted to broach, sidewalks in the Legends District. Originally, we had those slated, I think, to go all the way to Reggie, White Way, and even Bart Star over there, but they're not that far. Is there a plan to continue that
That's
work?
not a conversation for Public Works, that is a conversation for Community and Economic Development.
Okay, well then I'll wait for your CIP.
And I hate to put.
I don't have one, I don't think.
Well, no, I hate to put Cheryl on the spot here, that was not the intent. That was discussed, it was discussed with the development team, and Economic Development made the choice to stop where we stopped.
Okay.
That was a conscious decision.
All right, so Cheryl made a note, we'll come back. I think that's all I had. Bill, just an observation I noticed for you, sidewalk hound. It looked like the funding for sidewalks was going down.
Yeah.
Not this year, but next year.
On the sidewalk complaint program, it was 720 this year for 2024, but then it looks like 25.
Complaint or compliant?
Compliant, thank you.
Because there's a difference.
Yep, but you're right.
No, that's complaint program.
That is supposed to be complaint?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's just assuming that we're taking in less complaints as more and more get
No, there
fixed?
was a one-year doubling of that money.
Oh, and that was through the ARPA?
Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That helps.
And that's for this year or next year?
Correct.
What, this year or next year?
Well,
They're doubling the money?
we wound up with, I'd have to go back and see how much money it was. But originally, we were gonna spread that out over a number of years. But then speaking with Finance Director Ellen Becker, with the restrictions on the ARPA and getting that money spent, we threw at the 2 early years and spent as much of it as we could.
You didn't do any in my district that I can see. As I look at people walking in the middle of the street again.
That's because you have all the nicest and newest sidewalks.
You?
I'm teasing.
I know.
So, thank you for that explanation though, Steve. I forgot about the ARPA allocation.
In fact, I would ask for Director Ellenbecker, is it possible to reproduce this and have like a color code so if we know where the funding's coming from, we could have like a legend, like a blue highlight means it's
Can you-
coming from ARPA?
Do you mind just holding on
Sure.
to that for the end of the
Sure.
discussion? Because I got some additional dialogue I
All
want
right.
to force her on that very
I just didn't
point.
want to forget because
Yeah, yeah.
by the end of the discussion.
I'll write it down for you. over
Thank you.
here. Okay, anything else for DPW? Okay, thank you, Director Grenier. Director Ditchite, Parks.
So I'll kind of focus on the request for 2024, but if you have any questions beyond, I'm happy to answer them. For fleet and equipment replacement, we have about $900,000 allocated for 2024. Most of that is replacement vehicles and equipment that's just old and outdated and wore out. So we have one chipper, one Bobcat, we have a telescopic lift. We have several trucks and several UTVs. The only new piece of equipment that we have in that list is 1 or 2 UTVs that we would like to add to our fleet. We're starting to use those more and more instead of trucks because it's easy for our crews to get around and do maintenance when you're talking, you know, in the downtown area, especially at a, you know, Wright Park, Shipyard, Bay Beach Amusement Park. Those are really nice to have. Wildlife Sanctuary uses those quite a bit also. But most of it is just replacing aging equipment. What I'd like to talk a little bit more about those projects and kind of go over some of those in a little more detail. So Fireland Park, we have $230,000 allocated to that. If you recall, that was a $650,000 project for phase 1 reconstruction of Fireland. Some of that was funded through ARPA, some of it was funded through Community Development Block Grant. In that whole funding plan, the city council agreed to bond for the remaining shortage, which was $230,000, so that's what that is. Forestry tree nursery for $150,000. What we'd like to do is relocate the existing nursery from East River Van Beaver Park to Fort Howard Park, adjacent to our park shop, and we would be greatly expanding the size of that nursery. So our nursery is just too small for the size of our forestry department. The city keeps growing, we're doing more and more tree planting, so we need to increase the size of that nursery. We'll be discussing that in more detail at the Parks Committee tomorrow. At Old Preble North, we have some money in there for a new playground block and stormwater management. That's to continue with the development of the master plan that was approved several years ago. We installed the playground technically by federal standards. We do have to install an ADA accessible walkway to it, and that'll be a fairly expensive walk because of grades that need to be modified. We have money in there to replace the roof at the old park shop. That is just beyond its life expectancy. We have money in there to replace the underground gas tanks at the park shop. I know Steve didn't, Director Grenier didn't touch bases on that, but that's also, I believe, in his request to replace the tanks at their shop. So we'd like to do both of them in unison together as a cost savings. We have some additional money for Perkins to finish that ball field project, which we did all the grading and fencing this year. We have some additional work to get done so that we can open the field about 1.5 years from now to the public. Porlier Pier reconstruction, we have about $400,000 in there for that project. That would be to redevelop it as a smaller pier than what's currently there. And what we're anticipating to use that for is a match to a grant, which we would apply for in May. And we feel that we would have a pretty good chance of securing that grant. So it's a 50-50 grant. If you don't have funding in place as a match, you have less of a chance of getting the grant. So we're requesting that funding now. We do have some money in there for the Rush Aquatic Center for a pool heater. Just to note that just recently when we were shutting down our aquatics for the season, we do have about another $100,000 that we have to include either in our budget, the bond request, or in the ARPA request with additional capital improvements of necessary repairs that we have to do to open the facilities for next year. So that would be in addition to what's being shown here. And then we have new scoreboards at Colburn, Perkins, and Edison. We currently don't have scoreboards in those locations, so these would be new scoreboards. And then the other project, just to note, that is not on this list that we might want to reconsider is Light Memorial Park. As you're aware, we are developing a master plan for it. We were hoping to secure a $500,000 grant to help with the costs for that project. We did not get that grant. So now we have to kind of regroup and think about where we're going to come up with the money for that project, whether or not we apply for another grant in the future, whether or not we request ARPA funds, TIF funds, bonding. I'll have to have more conversations with the mayor and Alder Johnson on that to figure out which direction we want to go for Light Memorial Park redevelopment.
Thank you, Dan. I do think we need to add Light Park to this, and I think, the funding sources are to be identified, including the private equity investment in this. But I do think, the capital, the acknowledgement that this is a capital project that is anticipated to break ground next year, I think it's important to have that in here. You addressed the Porlier Pier, and I appreciate your explanation on that. The one question, because I think, my recollection is that we gave staff the green light to deconstruct what's there. So you're kind of suggesting from a parks perspective that we'd like to add this capital project in. Does that have to be authorized now, or can council authorize a subsequent bond request if and when that grant is awarded?
It could be done either way. Like I mentioned, if you have the funding in hand, you have a better chance of getting the grant versus having to secure it at a later date.
I'm just wondering if we can address it separately as more of like a, I don't know if this has ever been done, like a preliminary commitment from council, you know, to authorize a funding source, if that's sufficient enough. Because what I don't want to do is find ourselves in a position much like Bay Beach, right, in the past where it was, we're going to authorize $5 million, we hit all these hiccups, and now we're paying interest for however many years on this $5 million bond. I don't want to find ourselves in a position where we're bonding for it, don't get the grant, and now we're sitting on $410,000.
And what we could potentially look at, and I can check with the potential grant opportunity, but maybe there's a way to handle it as an official resolution that the city council adopts, indicating that if the grant is awarded, they will commit the funding.
Yeah, and I like having the project in here for the record. I just, when we get to the discussion about funding sources for all these things, I just, you know, kind of want to understand what our options might be for that one.
Sure.
Okay, and then in an email exchange we had, you had mentioned anticipated construction schedule for Bay Beach area pier. I don't see that on here.
Yeah, and that's because we're not requesting any additional funding for that.
Okay, so you're just using what's already on reserve?
We're using the existing funding that's already in hand.
Okay, and then the last question I had would be related to actually, let's touch base on that, because you had mentioned in the email to me as well that if, you know, the beach project were to go forward, that would require us to identify a funding source. So are we totally vacating the idea of that, or is that still an idea within the next 5 years? And if so, should that be in our plan here somewhere within this 5-year cycle?
That will be for a future discussion point. I know that there was, what we have funding for is to implement phase 1 of the project.
Right.
And that was brought to our committee, that was approved to implement the phasing plan. Phase 2 of the project is the development of the beach, which we do not have funding for. So if we wanted to include that within the next 5 years, we either need to hope that we make enough revenue out there to pay for it, or we would have to add it to the bond request.
Right, and is that something that, because I think, again, if it's something that we're intending to do, it should be somewhere on here. And so, are you kind of looking for a commitment from council, or a deep lack of a commitment, I guess, to keep it off, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or is there further discussion that has to occur around that item?
I'd like to have further discussion with the Parks Committee on that.
Okay.
And talk about where we sit with that project.
Okay, thank you. And then the last item that I just had on here, do you anticipate any purchase of new rides at Bay Beach that would be a capital expenditure, even if they do have a funding source attached to it?
Right now, we typically have not put those type of expenses in our CIP because it's all either donated funds or it's revenues we generate from Bay Beach Amusement Park.
And so it's revenues that sit in an account?
In a development account.
Okay.
Yeah. So because we're not requesting additional money for it, we haven't, the only time we've really ever done that in the recent past is when we did it for the Zip and Pippin. But beyond that, usually we find the money elsewhere to put rides in. So.
Okay.
But yeah, in our master plan, there are additional ride expansion opportunities.
Okay. I appreciate that explanation. And I don't think we have to fix it for this cycle, but, you know, if this is a capital improvement plan meant to reflect all the capital purchases by the city, it seems to me we ought to include all of them, even if there's a source of revenue that's going to pay for them, right? And like I said, I don't think we need to fix that this time around, but I think looking at next year that maybe we can clean up like how we present funding sources, which is what Alder Galvin was getting at. Okay, any other questions on parks? Bill? No? Okay.
Alder?
Yes, Alder Steuer.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Director Ditch, I would just ask about if Murphy Park was listed in here at all. Is that something separate as far as pickleball that we had talked about?
Pickleball, that was already funded through the ARPA funding, so that is actually being engineered right now. And it's really technically considered a 2023 project, but we'll be building it in the spring of 2024.
Okay, just for clarification. Okay. That's all I have.
All right, City Hall,
City Hall,
fiber optics and main electrical service.
so the main electrical service, that's been a discussion topic for several years now. We've kind of gone through that in detail in the past. But our electric service in City Hall is ancient and it's original to the building. It's something that our city electricians have recommended for years to replace the entire system throughout City Hall. Because if it were to ever go down and have a major problem with the electric, the parts don't exist anymore. So we could be down for potentially months in City Hall if we have a major catastrophic failure to our electric system. So every year I mention that. It's not something that we've funded to date, but it's something that we really need to consider. The other item that we have in there for this upcoming year is $400,000 to do cabling on the third floor. So Director Grenier might be able to speak more to this, but their cabling is very old. It doesn't meet the needs of their computer systems because they use GIS and AutoCAD. And for years, that's been something that we've been trying to fund also. We felt that this was the appropriate year to request that funding. So that's what that project is in relation to.
Okay, thank you. And just a broad comment again. This to me is the importance of the Ad hoc Facilities Committee, right? It was supposed to evaluate all of these expenditures and needs so that we could make good economic decisions or recommendations, for all of these major facility needs that are imminent. And I don't know kind of why that's taken so long to get back what we need to get back from our consultant, but just really cannot communicate enough the urgency with some of these expense items on here to get that committee back together, look at these recommendations, and hopefully come together with something that they can send over to council. So, okay, any questions on City Hall? TIF, this is really looking at Shipyard next year, 25, for the Phase 2 part is delayed. Not delayed, but
Yep.
maybe it is. I don't know.
Phase 2, which is the event lawn, dog park, urban beach, splash pads, restrooms. And then I think there's also talk about budgeting for Arndt and Bridge Streets as part of the merge development agreement also.
So will that get added in here? Or is that already under your report?
No, it's not on ours.
I think it's in this. Monies.
Well, it was included in the 2023 bonding.
Oh, it's already been in the
We already got
23
bonding in
CIP?
2023, the money is already in the house for that,
Got it.
those streets.
For the streets.
Yep.
Those streets, Bridge and Art, they were in his CIP from last year, or the 2023 program.
But they weren't done, right? So they
Correct.
should be in
Correct.
this CIP
Correct.
now. Because if you're going to use TIF for it, you haven't borrowed.
We borrowed
We
in
did.
2023.
We bonded for it?
$3 million, correct.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Merge was delayed and they're back on track now.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Sanitary sewer, Director
With
Grenier?
your indulgence, I'd like to take sanitary and storm collectively because they parallel each other.
Sure.
Again, what we've got is a mixture of capital improvement projects that parallel what we talked about under DPW for road reconstruction and resurfacing. Some equipment, and what you will notice if you look at sanitary and storm, a lot of times the equipment or fleet needs are oftentimes split between the two utilities because the same truck is used to work on sanitary sewer and storm sewer. So again, nothing here that's really surprising. I guess we just see if you have any questions rather than,
Sure. Seymour Park stormwater? Am I missing it?
no, the same thing. That was actually bonded for. We've got the money in-house. We're just waiting.
Oh, so you
on
have it
plans.
all?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was
Just
under
wait
the
for
understanding we
plans.
needed to bond more yet. Nope, okay, great. So that kind of, just dovetails in, right? Even if it's not done yet, and it's going to be done in '24, I think having that still on here is helpful for all of us, but just identifying that funding source.
And again, I think that kind of goes along with what you've asked for, to have this done a little bit earlier. And then if we can put the bonding request in 2020, earlier in the year, there's a chance that the project will get done in that
Yeah.
current year. I'll be honest, that would be very confusing if we already have borrowed for things and now it's gonna be in the 2024 column. 'Cause
Sure.
right now, the goal then, right now, going forward, would be whatever in 2024, we would look to see whether we had a funding source or we would be borrowing.
It could
for
even be a separate page, like an addendum at the end. Yeah. So I think there's a way to cleanly communicate that, and I appreciate, I agree with you. I think it'd be confusing to include it with these numbers, but, and I know this is a lot of work, and we really do appreciate all the work staff put into this, so I think it helps council make a little, transparent decisions too. Okay, parking utility.
Most of what you're looking at there, we've got one line, about 3/4 of the way through that parking utility, it talks about parking ramp repairs. That's an annual expense to ensure that the two ramps that we continue to maintain. We continue to operate Main, but we are no longer putting maintenance money into it because Main is in its last legs. We are in the process of making a determination as to when we're actually going to demo that ramp. It's sometime within the next 7.5 years at a maximum. But maintenance activities over there, we literally have some areas within that ramp where we've got concrete falling off of the ceiling. We need to make a decision as to whether or not that ramp has a purpose any longer, and if not, we need to get it down. So then we've got, for this year, we've got a box plow, some elevator doors in one of the ramps, some emergency money set up for emergency repairs, and then some ticket writer equipment. The one thing that's not in here showing for '24, because we haven't made a decision on it yet, but we are definitely leaning toward. Elevator number 2 in the Cherry Street ramp has been down for 1.5 years.
Just
And
milk Chris about this one.
we have been trying to work with our vendor, and they order a part and then something else breaks. They order a part and they can't get it. Schindler Elevators, the manufacturer of that, is no longer supporting the unit. We're probably looking somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000 worth of capital expense to potentially rip out and replace that elevator as early as 2024, but we're still trying to firm that out.
And I know you guys are working on something for replacing Main Street. I know how it looks and where it would be is still very fluid. Do you, recognizing though that Main Street's got a 7.5-year span, would you anticipate that a new ramp would need to be constructed before Main is deconstructed? So I'm thinking about like KI Convention Center, right, Hyatt, and how they serve.
I would strongly encourage the alders to get involved in the discussion relative to the parking study that was recently completed and is being debated at INS, because decisions relative to capacity and needs analysis for parking in the downtown are definitely part of that study.
So do you anticipate something new would be built before you deconstruct?
That's going to be up to the common council.
Sure.
100%. Right now, the way the report is written, the recommendation is there is an excess of parking available in downtown, and we are not recommending that a replacement ramp be built.
Certainly not that size, yeah. I think a lot of it's,
That's the smallest ramp we have. That's only 681 stalls. If you start building any smaller than 600, you're going to pay exorbitantly.
That's all that one is?
681.
Okay.
800 in Cherry, 1,843 in Pine.
Yeah, I thought that one was bigger. I thought it was like 1,100. Okay. Okay, noted. That is it, right? Wait, Cheryl, how did you escape this?
We lease our vehicles.
So I do have a couple questions for you, though. Sidewalks, Legends District.
follow up and find out why we stopped doing them, or was it the funding, I'm not sure. Let me find out
Okay,
what,
yeah.
what's up with the sidewalks.
Yeah, I'd like to just, we've got all the bump outs out there, right? And they look great, except they look kind of silly when you don't have a sidewalk. Because you look at them and wonder why you didn't just put the poles in the grass then. But obviously, and I know it's a hand-in-hand thing, right? Development and all that, but,
Well, and the short answer is the poles wouldn't have gone in the grass anyway. The whole reason the bump outs went out there is because there was no room in the terrace for the utilities. The way that project came around, there was a request to get the overhead utilities buried underground, and based on where the existing utilities were, the only place to put things was in the terrace. We ran out of room. There was no room to put the poles. So where do we put the poles? We actually put them where the pavement should be.
yeah. They look good. I like them. Okay, and then the other thing, Cheryl, that I had on here, council obviously allocated $1 million for strategic site acquisitions, which would be capital purchase, $1 million. That's going to occur before '26. So probably something we should at least have in here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It'll be, ARPA will be the identified funding source, but
Okay.
anything else?
We're gonna talk about recommendations for this.
Yeah. Explain to us, if you would, please, because I know we're taking this up a lot sooner than normal. Normally, it would come in the spring, right?
Last year, we did the CIP at the same time. We went through,
did?
we spent
Okay.
2 meetings, went through it, realized that we got to the budget, realized there was no capacity to put additional capital items in there. We kind of let it rest, and then it was expected to come back through around December, January time, and it got delayed. So the goal is really to decide, bring these through together. And most municipalities do bring them through together.
But to me, it seems to make sense that we ought to first put funding sources to each item so that way we fully comprehend what is really a levy requirement, whether it's through bond or directly through the budget. What the capacity is based on the recommendation from our bond council. And then if everything else is ARPA or TIF supported, it's almost like, I don't want to say you don't have to consider it, right? You still have to give the thumbs up or down if you're going to do it, but, I'm most worried about stripping out the numbers that affect the levy. And then really seeing where things shake out. So for me, and I don't want to speak for either of these two alders, I'm a little reluctant to just say we approve the CIP without understanding funding sources and how all that flows together. But of course, we're going to start having budget discussions and bonding discussions at the same time. And this is a really, really, I'm really happy that we're this far ahead right now.
Yeah, so there is a possible action on here. At this point, I didn't expect action to be taken, because I thought, like last year, we were able to take it through 2 meetings, and then by the second meeting, that I did have some information of the funding source. And again, that, that this is a moving document. Every single day,
Yep.
something changes, whether or not we have a funding source, we have grants, we have ARPA, how much money is left in a fund balance that is able to carry some of these items. So the funding source is the largest challenge on this document, is to tell you what we think we can cover.
So maybe a prudent action at this point would be to refer back to staff and have you identify possible funding sources for each of these items and to contemplate the discussion that was had today. Is that fair? Unless there's anybody that wants to make a specific direct change to anything here. I think it's easier just to say contemplate.
Alder, did you have a recommendation on
Just on
color coding?
like the color coding, if you could identify that would make it easy as we're reading through this document to say, oh, this is coming from ARPA, this is coming from the levy, grants, whatever else is out there.
Does it make sense even, Bill, aside from color coding, I'm thinking just, here are the ARPA supported items, here are the,
Yeah, if you want to block it out like that. I mean,
Right.
whichever is easier for you to do.
because otherwise you're going to be here with your calculator trying to
Yeah.
add up where we are.
This is a program that has been built by the IT department. I will certainly see whether or not, what capacities they have before. I can always dump this into an Excel document and I can sort and cut and paste.
It's kind of what I was thinking, but I'm pretty remedial that way, so IT's probably pretty clever. Could do it, Dave.
Comparatively, yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Someone want to make a motion?
We're gonna make a motion to refer back to staff with the recommendations just stated.
Second.
Yeah, I think refer back to staff and identify funding sources.
Yeah.
Keep it that simple.
Okay. We make
So-
that motion.
Motion by Hutchison, a second by Galvin. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thanks again to all the staff that put the work into that. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I think we're making a lot of good progress over the last couple of years to get things into kind of a better alignment. Okay. 5, consideration with possible action regarding a budget amendment resolution for unbudgeted overtime for special events.
15.
Yep. Motion approved.
Second.
Motion by Galvin, a second by Hutchison. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
Hey, Dan, are you gonna be around after the meeting, or are you bailing?
I can stick around for a little bit.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and then the last, of course, is the Claims Committee.
I have no questions.
No questions?
Okay,
Motion to receive and place on file.
Second.
okay, we have a motion by Galvin, a second by Hutchison. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. F, report of the Finance Director.
I would like to give a quick update. This was something that had been asked or requested, is just to see where are we ending, or where is our projection on 2023 actuals against budget. So I don't even have it on paper. I pulled it together today just to show you where we're at. General fund, overall, I think expenses are gonna come in very close to budget. We have some favorabilities. Fuel is coming in quite a bit favorable. Right now, projected about 700,000 from the budget. Lighting over 100,000, but then we have some items that look like they're running over budget, and that is some equipment repairs. Overall, we've had we can show about $1 million worth of favorability and turnover. Unfortunately, we have a budget of 900,000, so we're really at budget, but then we also have, the fire department is running very over on overtime. It could be to the tune of $1 million for 2023. Net that all together, it looks like all the favorabilities, we're gonna be very close to budget.
So even with the favorabilities though, I mean, because we had budgeted, right, to have so much in
Correct.
turnover, is that accounted
Correct.
for in that assessment?
It's not actually, I brought it down in the revenue section, but we expected we anticipated about $500,000 of applied surplus to be used against that fuel. And right now, like I said, we're projecting about 770 being favorable.
Okay.
So that, surplus really did come in handy because we did expect that to come in. So we won't be using applied surplus at this point.
Right.
We won't be using fund balance
That'd be
because
great.
we are coming in favorable.
Okay, so on a scale of dumpster fire to rainbows and sunshine, where would you say we land?
Then that would say, if we net those two, then we could be $500,000 over on expenses, just as projection and looking at it right now. And again, there's a few favorabilities, a few things running a little unfavorable, and again, overtime is gonna be driving this number unfavorable overall.
The true finance director. I'm looking for an analogy and she comes back with numbers.
But on the second half, revenues, to date, it looks like by the end of the year, we could be $2 million favorable on interest from our budget of 600,000, so we could be at 2.6. We have some things that are running favorable, short-term permits, EMS revenues, reinspection fees, all tend to be, I expect they're gonna be over. We're gonna be a little bit short on ordinance violations, recyclables, and again, the surplus, built that in. I still think that revenues will be, with all of the offsetting, we will be favorable, taking surplus out of it, about 700,000 favorable. So if we can get the projection of expenses at budget or just slightly over, I think we will be having slight surplus. That's projection as of this moment.
So the reason that this was asked to be on here is because obviously during budget season, there were some revenues that were increased, and some other modifications made, and I think the concern is, are we going to meet what we said we were going to meet? And it sounds like any budgeting year, some things will hit, some things will miss, but overall, we're tacking okay.
Yep, your slide surplus was for two things, the fuel, and that is coming running favorable, and the other one was for legal expenses. And at that point, we believe that we're gonna be, use the amount that has been budgeted. And if it doesn't get spent by this end of this year, we are looking to just carry over that additional money, because really the dollars are allocated. We just may not actually have the actual expenses by the end of this year for the two larger projects that your team, your consultants are working on.
Okay.
With the fire department overtime, is that, I mean, there's always overtime, right? So is this above and beyond what's normal for overtime, $1 million?
I can start dollar-wise. Certainly, there was, if you remember last year, there was, the fire department had a overtime budget of about $1.2 million for the 2022 budget. And when they came in on 23, they thought it would be about 1.9. And so it was gonna go up about 700,000. So there was a request to either give them more overtime or give them more staff. Last year, we ended up adding 7 firefighters. And then we brought their overtime budget back down to basically the 2022 levels. So they have received the additional staff, which it did really start until March, and they really weren't on their force. And then, of course, they've had some additional leave, and then they've also have lost some other employees. So at this point, their budget was still around 1.2 million, and it looks like they're gonna hit about 2.1 million this year. That's a projection, could be a 1.9, could be 2.
I think, yeah, and again, our budget, I think we're gonna be on that lower end of the estimate too, and hopefully we'll talk, this could be a part of our discussion tomorrow too on this. But certainly there was an increase of staffing need for us. This year we've hired 24 individuals since I've been here, and that's a considerable number, that's 10% of our force. And so, the first group was hired early. We just hired 7 at Labor Day, and that is as quickly as we could process those individuals through this process. So 7 were just hired at Labor Day, and they have not been before yet. So, next year we do see substantial budget reductions. We're still, like I said, overtime is a cost of business, but.
Well, it's the cost of business, but it's also the cost of.
Correct.
I mean, in the past, when it starts running out of control like this.
Right. Yeah.
We need to anticipate that, and we need to be flexible. I mean, we hired 7 extra people, overhired for it. I mean, now it seems to be, I mean, why are these people, is this all retirements, and why aren't we seeing this in other departments?
Yeah, and I think, like I said, we've hired, with the 24 individuals we've hired this year, so we're working on it, we're fixing the problem.
What is the problem?
Just staffing, just maintaining our daily staffing levels.
How come we're not seeing this in other departments, like police or parks or
We
DPW?
could analyze and look too, but again, with hiring 10% of our force this year, that's probably a big factor.
But this whole force isn't the city of Green Bay, it's Bellevue, it's Alloway, correct?
Correct. Yeah, so there's money to offset those costs, and that comes back as a revenue source for us.
So even with this revenue source from Alloway and Bellevue, we're still looking at, what, $900,000 or so?
Bellevue and Alloway, we have a contract with them, so we know what revenue we're bringing in. We don't offset the expenses. I mean, so the revenue is consistent on what is brought in for them. And you're right, I apologize, Chief, you're right. I did just take where we're running to date and kind of assume the same assumptions for the next 4 months for overtime, knowing that you have a staff that is now in place, and then now you have some new recruits. It probably won't be quite as bad, but it could, yeah, it still could be
So
Our
I mean-
salary line should be lower than too, right? If people didn't start until March?
Fire department's one of the only departments that we always have them start in March, because that is the only, they always have the recruit class about March, middle of March. So we typically have them start on a 3/1. So we knew that on the new employees,
So
that.
the 7 new firefighters that we hired were budgeted for
Correct.
March? Okay.
Right, and they started in this last month, or this month, so,
And how long is their recruit school?
those are doing 8 weeks.
So they're done in May?
The first group was, correct, and then this group should be done here in November.
And when were they hired?
They were just hired right after Labor Day.
Right after Labor Day. So does Alloway and Bellevue pick up this overtime, some of this overtime cost to us?
No, that's all part of that contract. So there's some contract fees built into that to account for the overtime, but they're paying for the daily staffing in their stations.
I mean, the PD's not experiencing this. 10% of the department quitting.
It's not, I mean, they didn't quit, it's just through attrition, plus, and I think there was, so it's not like, we don't have a retention problem. These are hired as long-term employees. and
So 24 members retired, is what you're
Plus
telling
the
me?
7, plus, well, 17 had retired, there were 17 openings, plus the 7 that we just hired, which was the overhire.
It just seems, I'm frustrated.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I don't see how we overhire, all this other stuff. I just remember in the past when stuff like this happened, there were changes that were made, that were implemented, because this is a shock to the system.
Sure.
Without this, we would have been looking really good budget-wise.
Yeah, I mean,
In fact, the surplus, which we all know that we could use a surplus.
we're cognizant of our budget, we're looking at it, like I said, that 17 was hired right as soon as I got here, and we were trying to get those positions filled. So we'll continue to do that too, and really be cognizant of our budget.
All right, thank you.
Diana, not that I want you to put a ton of time in this, but I know that there probably will be questions heading into this budget season about where we are year-to-date performance-wise. And I appreciate your verbal account. Can we put this into just a brief synopsis so that for those who need some satisfaction or have questions, that they've got a document that they can look at?
Yep. So sometimes during the budget process, I don't pull it together only because the preliminary budget book has a column for projection. So in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we ask all the departments to update their projections, and then I do verify or look it over. But you're right, if it was on a one page, I could get you some kind of projection.
Yeah, just like those big numbers in particular that you highlighted. And then maybe can you just email that to council
Yep. What timeline would you like this? Before the next council meeting?
when it's convenient for you? I don't want to put like a undue burden on you when you've got a lot of other things going on too. And that's why I'm definitely saying like it doesn't have to be overly complex, but I've been getting questions, and the reason we asked you to cover this was after a meeting with the mayor and Joe and Alder Brunette, and wanting to maybe just get some clarity around some of those things.
Sure.
So, okay. Anything else for the report? Okay. 123 contingency account, $244,643.36. Quick question. 22 contingency, we had that issue with the parks insurance claim. Has that been resolved?
It has been. Top of my head, it was either $93,000 or $97,000 out of the up to a possible $100,000 that they spent. But we also did get a insurance recovery of in the 80,000s. So we spent about $93,000, and we got an insurance recovery of about 80,000. But the timing of the insurance recovery, that first just came in April or May. So we basically show the $90-some thousand expense in the 2022 expenses, because we had no way to even look up a revenue, because we at that point did not know for sure we were going to get an insurance recovery. So in spring now, we have received a insurance recovery. and I can't remember exactly the dollar amount, but that is going to hit as an additional revenue in the 2023. So that would be another positive that we would have as a projection,
Okay,
in our projection.
okay, so the audit was done.
Audit was done, we didn't know at that
Yeah.
point, again, it's still, by time April came around and we were doing the audit, normally if we knew that was coming, but the timing hadn't hit, we
Right.
would book up a receivable for that item, and we did not know at that, but we had no confirmation we were gonna get a reimbursement.
Okay,
And
so
we didn't
this
know the
isn't
dollar
gonna
amount.
go to the fund balance, it's gonna go really into our operating
Correct, at this point.
budget for this year, and
Correct.
whatever happens at the end of the year happens.
It would have made last year $80,000 better. And we were, last year, we ended up 101,000 short of a deficit, so that would actually brought us closer to 20,000 if that money would have been in last year's, numbers. Now, it'll just hit in this year, and you're right, it'll just make our fund balance potentially increase a surplus. If we have one, it'll increase our surplus.
Right, okay. Thank you for that update. Next Finance Committee meeting will be held on September 26, 2023 at 4:30 PM.
Motion adjourned.
Motion by Galvin to adjourn, second by Hutchinson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.